A cowboy rescues an Apache woman. Then the Baron arrives demanding his future wife. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the endless plains in shades of gold and orange. Jack Sawyer, a rugged cowboy with years of experience on the trails, rode alone. His horse, a sturdy bay named Thunder, moved steadily over the dry earth, kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. Jack's eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the horizon. The quiet of the plains was unusual this evening. Usually there would be the distant calls of birds or the rustle of rabbits in the grass. Tonight there was only a heavy, tense silence that pressed on him like the weight of a coming storm. Jack had been following a trail for several days. Bandits had been terrorizing nearby settlements, stealing horses, and taking whatever they pleased. The townsfolk had spoken of them with fear in their eyes, and though Jack had no obligation to intervene, his sense of justice would not allow him to ignore the trouble. He rode faster, guided by instinct and the occasional broken branch or flattened grass that told him where the bandits had passed. As he moved deeper into a narrow valley, a faint sound caught his attention. It was a soft, desperate cry, almost swallowed by the wind. Jack's hand instinctively moved toward the rifle slung across his back, his heart quickening. "Someone's in trouble," he muttered under his breath. Without hesitation, he urged Thunder forward, following the sound. The cries grew louder, more urgent, until they led him to a small clearing beside a creek. There, tied roughly to a tree, was a young woman. Her dark hair was tangled, and her clothes, though once beautiful, were torn and dusty. Her eyes were fierce, yet frightened, and they widened in alarm as Jack approached. She pulled at the ropes, but they were tight, cutting into her wrists. Jack dismounted quickly, keeping his hands visible so she would not fear him. "Easy now," he said gently.
"I'm not going to hurt you."
The woman looked at him skeptically. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Name's Jack. I saw you tied up and heard your cries. I'm here to help." He reached for his knife and carefully cut the ropes binding her wrists. She rubbed them, still wary of him, but too weak to protest further. Once free, she stood shakily, brushing dust from her clothes. Jack noticed the strength in her posture despite the obvious injuries. She was proud, unbroken, and unwilling to show fear even in such a vulnerable moment. "My name is Ayasha," she said finally. You shouldn't have come here. They'll follow."
Jack frowned. "Who did this to you?" Ayasha's eyes darkened.
A rich man. He says I am meant to be his wife. I never agreed, but he claims it was arranged long ago." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, staring at the creek as if it might hold some answers. Jack felt a surge of anger. The idea that anyone could force her into such a life was intolerable. "We're going to get you out of this. Come with me. You're safe for now, but we need to move before they find us." Ayasha hesitated. She had been betrayed before, and trust did not come easily. But the sincerity in Jack's eyes and the fact that he had risked entering this dangerous area to help her gave her a small glimmer of hope. Finally, she nodded. Jack mounted Thunder again, and Ayasha climbed onto the horse behind him. He wrapped his arm around her to keep her steady, and together they rode into the growing twilight. The wind whipped past them, carrying the scent of wild grass and distant pine. For a moment the world seemed vast and beautiful, yet fraught with danger. As night began to fall, Jack found a sheltered spot near a cluster of rocks where they could rest. He made a small fire, careful not to draw attention from anyone who might be tracking them. Ayasha sat beside the fire, her eyes reflecting the flames, lost in thought. "You don't have to tell me everything now," Jack said softly. "But if we're going to stay ahead of them, I need to understand what we're dealing with." Ayasha's gaze met his. There was pain there, but also defiance. "He's powerful, rich, influential. His name is Baron von Richter. He thinks he owns everything, including people. He believes I am meant to be his wife. He doesn't care what I want." Jack's jaw tightened. He was used to facing dangerous men, but there was something particularly cruel about someone who believed they could claim another person's life like property. "We won't let him get you," he said firmly. The night grew darker, and the stars began to shine brightly overhead. Thunder grazed nearby, sensing the calm but alert tension in the air. Jack kept watch while Ayasha tried to rest, her mind restless with fear and uncertainty. She had never imagined being pulled from her home and tied up by a man she did not choose. Yet now, with Jack at her side, there was a sense of safety, even if temporary. They traveled quietly the next morning, following a narrow trail that twisted through the hills. Jack was cautious, knowing that Baron von Richter would not send just anyone to find her. He would send skilled men, experienced trackers who could move silently across the plains. Every rustle of grass, every distant sound of hooves, made Jack's hand hover near his rifle.
Ayasha tried to speak to distract herself from the fear that lingered.
"Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. There's a canyon I know. It's hidden, and we can rest there, plan our next move." She nodded, trusting him more with each passing mile. Though she had been a captive and feared for her life, Jack's calm confidence gave her hope. She realized that courage could come from more than just standing alone. It could come from the people who chose to stand with you. As the sun reached its peak, they stopped briefly at a small stream. Ayasha knelt to drink, her hands trembling slightly from the cold water. Jack kept a careful watch, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. The plains seemed peaceful, but he knew better. Danger could appear suddenly, without warning. "You've been through a lot," Jack said quietly. "But you're strong, I can tell." Ayasha gave a small, almost shy smile. "I don't feel strong. I feel tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being told what I must do." Jack nodded, understanding her completely. He had seen the world's cruelty many times, but he also knew that the human spirit could be resilient beyond imagination. "We'll rest soon," he promised. "Then we'll figure out the next step together." As evening fell again, they reached the edge of the hidden canyon Jack had mentioned. Tall rocks rose on either side, casting long shadows over the narrow path. It was secluded, almost invisible from the main trails. Jack guided Thunder carefully down the rocky slope until they found a flat area where they could make camp. Ayasha looked around, relief softening her features. "It feels safe here," she said. "For now," Jack replied. "But we can't forget who's after us." They settled near a small fire, eating a simple meal. The quiet of the canyon was broken only by the crackle of flames and the occasional distant howl of a coyote. Jack and Ayasha sat close, the tension between them eased slightly by the sense of temporary safety. For the first time since her capture, Ayasha allowed herself to feel a little hope. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly, looking at him. Jack shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Does it matter? I saw someone in trouble, and I didn't like it. That's enough reason." Ayasha studied him for a long moment, realizing that sometimes the simplest answers were the truest. She felt a small spark of trust growing between them, fragile but real. As the night deepened, they both lay under the stars. The world beyond the canyon was dangerous, but here, in this small hidden space, there was a moment of peace. Jack kept watch, silent and vigilant, while Ayasha slowly drifted into an uneasy but much-needed sleep. The fire burned low, and the wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the promise of another day, a day when their journey would continue, fraught with danger, but also filled with the possibility of freedom. And though neither could see the challenges that lay ahead, both knew that as long as they faced them together, there was a chance to survive, to escape, and perhaps in time to reclaim the life that had been taken from Ayasha. The morning light filtered softly through the rocks of the hidden canyon. Jack Sawyer stirred first, careful not to wake Ayasha. The faint sounds of birds and the distant rush of wind through the canyon's walls were the only noises. He took a moment to study her, sleeping peacefully for the first time since her capture. There was a calmness about her now, but Jack knew it was fragile. The Baron's men were still out there, and every passing hour could bring danger. Jack gently nudged Thunder awake, the horse blinking at the early sun. He mounted and rode a small circle around the perimeter of the canyon, scanning for any tracks. Nothing. For now, they were safe. He returned to the camp and untied a few ropes to make a simple harness for carrying food and water. Ayasha was stirring as he approached, her dark eyes taking in the early light. "Morning, Jack," said softly. Ayasha yawned and rubbed her eyes, trying to shake the stiffness from sleeping on the hard ground. "Morning," she replied. Did anyone follow us?" Jack shook his head. "Not yet, but we can't stay here too long. The Baron's men are clever. They know every shortcut and every hidden trail. We have to keep moving before they catch up." Ayasha nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the simple satchel Jack had given her. I want to go back to my people, my family," she said quietly. "I never wanted to leave them." Jack's expression softened. "But we need to be careful. We can't run blindly. We need a plan." The first part of their journey was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Jack led Ayasha along narrow, winding trails, taking care to avoid open plains where they could be seen. Ayasha noticed the skill with which Jack navigated, moving silently and watching every movement in the distance. She began to feel a sense of trust growing. For the first time since her capture, she did not feel entirely alone. As the day progressed, Jack set up small rest stops, teaching Ayasha how to stay low and use the natural landscape for cover. She listened carefully, determined to learn. Though she had lived most of her life far from such dangers, she realized that understanding the land could be the key to her freedom. "You have to watch for footprints," Jack explained, pointing to the soft dirt along the trail. "Even the smallest disturbance can give away your position." Ayasha knelt, running her fingers over the ground. "Like this?" "Yes," Jack said approvingly. "You're a quick learner. Keep paying attention to every detail. That could save your life." As they moved deeper into the hills, Jack decided they needed more than just hiding. They needed information. They stopped at a small abandoned cabin nestled in a grove of trees. It was old, weathered by time and wind, but it would provide shelter and a chance to rest without being noticed. Inside, they found a small fireplace, a few broken chairs, and a table. Jack stacked some firewood, while Ayasha explored quietly, running her hands along the wooden walls. "It's not much," Jack said, "but it'll keep us safe for the night." Ayasha nodded. "Better than nothing," she replied. That evening, as they sat by a fire, Ayasha opened up more about her past. She spoke softly, almost hesitantly at first, but as the warmth of the fire and Jack's steady presence reassured her, she spoke more freely. "My family, we live far from here, in the hills where the land meets the forest," she said. "We've always kept to ourselves, away from men like the Baron. He thinks he can buy and control anything he wants. He doesn't see people as people, only as objects." Jack frowned, anger simmering beneath the surface. "I've met men like that, dangerous men. They think power gives them the right to do whatever they want, but we'll make sure he doesn't get you." "Not while I'm around." Ayasha looked at him, eyes wide. You're risking yourself. Why?" "You don't even know me," Jack shrugged, though his eyes showed determination. "Sometimes it's enough to see someone in trouble, and I don't like seeing anyone treated unfairly." The night was long, and sleep came only in fits. Jack kept watch, listening for any sign of pursuit. Ayasha lay beside the fire, wrapped in a small blanket, thinking of her people and the life she had lost. Fear was still there, but so was a spark of hope, a hope that maybe, with Jack's help, she could reclaim her freedom. The next morning, they continued their journey, moving quickly before the heat of the day. They followed narrow paths through the hills, avoiding the main trails that the Baron's men would likely use. Jack noticed small signs of tracking, broken twigs, displaced stones, but nothing immediately threatening. Still, the tension never left him. As they traveled, Jack and Ayasha encountered the beauty of the land around them. Golden meadows stretched for miles, dotted with wildflowers. Birds called from the trees and distant mountains loomed, their peaks glowing with the first light of the sun. It was a reminder that even in the midst of danger, there was beauty in the world, something worth fighting for. "You see that?" Jack said, pointing toward a distant ridge. "That's where we'll find more cover. There are caves and overhangs where we can hide if we need to. It's not far, but it's safer than staying on open ground." Ayasha nodded, her heart lifting slightly. "I've never been this far from home," she admitted. "But it feels like I can breathe here." Jack smiled faintly. "Good. Breathe. But stay alert. Danger can appear anywhere." As the sun climbed higher, they stopped for a brief rest beside a stream. Ayasha knelt to drink, splashing cool water onto her face. Jack scanned the area, noticing the subtle signs of movement, bird flight patterns, the way leaves shifted in the wind. Every detail mattered.
"I've learned something," Ayasha said softly.
Even in the wild, there's a rhythm. You can feel danger before it reaches you if you pay attention. Jack nodded. "Exactly. That's how you survive out here." The day passed with little incident, though Jack remained tense. He knew that Baron von Richter would not simply send ordinary men after them. He would send the best trackers, skilled in reading the land and following trails. Every sound, every shift of wind could betray them. As evening approached, they found a secluded grove of trees near a rocky outcrop. It was an ideal spot for a temporary camp. Jack made a small fire, and they shared a simple meal of bread and dried meat. Ayasha, despite exhaustion, asked questions about Jack's past, how he had learned to survive in the wild, how he had faced men like the Baron before. Jack answered honestly, sharing stories of danger, courage, and the choices he had made to protect those who could not protect themselves. Ayasha listened intently, feeling a growing sense of trust. She realized that strength came in many forms, not just physical power, but courage, compassion, and the willingness to act when others would not. Jack embodied all of these qualities, and she felt safer with him by her side. The night deepened, and stars sparkled overhead. Jack kept watch while Ayasha rested. He thought of the challenges ahead, how to keep her safe, how to avoid the Baron, and how to ensure that she could reclaim her life. It would not be easy. The Baron was clever, wealthy, and ruthless, but Jack knew that together they had a chance. Ayasha, lying beside the fire, felt a flicker of hope. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to believe that she might escape the Baron's grasp. She thought of her family, of the life she wanted to return to, and of the man who had risked everything to save her. In that hidden grove, surrounded by the wild beauty of the hills, two people who had only just met found an unspoken bond. One had the courage to protect, and the other the courage to hope. And as they faced the unknown dangers of the world beyond the canyon, they understood that trust, courage, and determination were their greatest allies. The night passed with little disturbance, and as dawn approached, the first hints of light brushed the edges of the hills. Jack prepared for another day of travel, knowing that the Baron's reach was long and relentless. But for now, they had a small victory, a safe place to rest, a growing trust between them, and a glimpse of hope in a world filled with danger. And so, with the morning sun casting a golden glow over the hills, Jack and Ayasha continued their journey. Every step brought them closer to freedom, but also closer to the challenges that awaited. Yet, for the first time since her capture, Ayasha felt that she was not alone, and that maybe, just maybe, the life she longed for was still within reach. The sun had barely risen when Jack and Ayasha began their day's journey through the rugged hills. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant pine. Jack guided Thunder carefully along narrow paths that wound between rocky outcrops, always scanning for any signs of movement. Ayasha rode behind him, gripping the horse's mane lightly, her eyes scanning the terrain with growing awareness. She had learned much from Jack over the past days, and now she knew the land could be an ally if observed closely. "Keep your eyes open," Jack warned. "The Baron won't let this go. He has men who know how to track people through terrain like this. They'll be following us soon."
Ayasha nodded silently, a knot of worry tightening in her stomach.
She had hoped that distance and rough terrain might give them some safety, But Jack's words reminded her that the threat was far from over. By late morning, as the sun climbed higher, the first signs of pursuit appeared. Broken twigs and small scuff marks in the dirt suggested that someone, or more likely, several people, was tracking them. Jack slowed Thunder, crouching slightly and inspecting the ground. "They're close," he muttered. "Skilled trackers. Whoever they are, they're patient and careful."
Ayasha swallowed hard. Her mind raced with fear and strategy.
"Do they want to capture me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack's jaw tightened.
Yes, the Baron wants you back.
He's not used to being denied. But don't worry, we'll make it difficult for them. The day wore on with careful movement. Jack and Ayasha used every trick he knew, keeping to hidden paths, moving quietly, and making sure they left misleading tracks when possible. They took breaks in hidden nooks behind boulders or under low-hanging cliffs, drinking water from small streams and eating sparse rations. Every pause was brief, as both knew the Baron's men could appear at any moment. By mid-afternoon, the sound of hooves echoed faintly from a distance. Jack raised a hand, signaling Ayasha to stay low. He dismounted silently, pressing his ear to the ground. The distant noise was deliberate, approaching horses. He scanned the hills and caught a glimpse of dust rising in the far distance. "They're here," he said quietly. "The Baron has sent men himself. We need to move fast." Ayasha's heart pounded in her chest. She had feared capture before, but now the danger was very real, very near. She clutched Jack's arm as he led her through a narrow canyon that twisted between high cliffs. The shadows of the rocks stretched long across the ground, giving them cover. As they moved, Jack spoke in a low voice. "Listen, Ayasha. They'll try to block our path. If that happens, we'll split up for a moment. Don't panic. Stay hidden until you see me or hear my whistle. Can you do that?" Ayasha nodded, fear mixing with determination. She trusted Jack, and she knew that panicking now could be worse than the danger itself. Suddenly, a sharp whistle pierced the air. Dust rose from the path ahead, as a group of men emerged, clearly expecting an easy capture. They were well mounted, their horses trained for speed, and each carried weapons. But Jack was ready. He led Ayasha into a hidden gap between rocks, and they crouched behind boulders as the men passed, unaware of the figures hidden just out of sight. Once the riders had moved on, Jack helped Ayasha up and urged Thunder forward.
"We have to go higher," he said. "The cliffs above the canyon have caves."
"They'll give us a place to rest and watch the valley below. They won't find us there easily." The climb was treacherous, with narrow ledges and loose stones. Jack moved first, testing each step, while Ayasha followed cautiously, her heart racing with every slip. Thunder followed steadily, guided by Jack's voice and gentle commands. Finally, they reached a small plateau where a series of caves provided perfect cover. Jack lit a small fire inside one of the caves, careful to keep it low. The space was cramped but offered excellent visibility of the surrounding hills. Ayasha settled near the back of the cave, her eyes wide as she watched the smoke drift out through a small opening. "They're clever, but they underestimate the land," Jack said quietly. "This gives us a chance to rest and plan. But they won't give up easily. The Baron is patient and cunning." Ayasha shivered. The thought of Baron von Richter sending more men after them, sending waves of fear through her. Why is he so obsessed with me?" she asked. Jack looked at her, a hard expression softening slightly. "It's not about you. It's about control. He's used to getting what he wants. You're strong and smart, and that's frightening to him. He's not used to being denied." She nodded slowly, understanding the truth in his words. It was not her own worth that had attracted him, but her refusal to submit. That realization made her feel both frightened and empowered. The rest of the day passed in tense quiet. They stayed inside the cave, occasionally peering out to watch dust rise in the distance. It was clear that the Baron's men were combing the hills, looking for any trace of them. Jack explained the signs to Ayasha: broken branches, footprints, and changes in the landscape that suggested human movement. She listened carefully, absorbing every detail. Her survival now depended as much on her awareness as on Jack's skill. By evening, the men tracking them had retreated temporarily, likely regrouping or waiting for the Baron's orders. Jack decided it was time to move again, but cautiously. They descended from the plateau and continued along hidden paths, following a narrow river that twisted through the hills. The sound of flowing water was a relief, masking the noise of their travel and helping them stay hidden. Along the river, Ayasha began to ask more questions, her curiosity growing despite the danger.
Jack, what if he catches us?
What if the Baron comes himself? Jack paused, resting his hand on her shoulder. Then we'll be ready. I've faced dangerous men before. He might be rich and powerful, but we have something he doesn't. Knowledge of this land and the courage to fight for what's right. Ayasha took a deep breath, trying to absorb his calm confidence. For the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to hope. She understood now that escape was possible, but it would take more than luck. It would take courage, planning, and the willingness to confront danger head-on. As night fell, they found another small cave to rest in. The fire this time was smaller, the shadows longer, and the wind carrying the distant cries of animals through the hills. Jack kept watch while Ayasha tried to rest, listening to his breathing and the quiet noises of the wilderness. For a moment the world outside seemed paused, as if holding its breath. Suddenly, a distant sound of hooves broke the stillness. Jack stiffened, straining to hear. "They're back," he whispered. "The Baron's men are closing in, and I think he might be coming himself." Ayasha's heart pounded. She had imagined this moment, feared it, but now it was real. She clutched Jack's arm, her fear mixing with determination. We can't let him take me," she said firmly. Jack looked at her, eyes steady.
No, not while I'm alive.
"We'll face him together if we have to, but we'll do it smart. We'll use the land to our advantage. He won't see us coming until it's too late." The night stretched on, filled with tension and anticipation. Jack explained his plan in low whispers, how they would use the hills, the caves, and the narrow trails to stay ahead. Ayasha listened, understanding for the first time that survival required both courage and strategy. Hours passed, and the sound of hooves faded into the distance. For now, they were safe. But both knew it would not last. The Baron was powerful, cunning, and relentless, and soon Jack realized they would have to confront him directly. Ayasha stared at the cave's opening, her mind filled with both fear and resolve. She understood that her fate was still in danger, but with Jack by her side, she felt that she could face whatever came. Together they were preparing for a confrontation that would test courage, wit, and the strength of the human spirit. And as the stars shone over the hills, Jack and Ayasha settled in for a short rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring danger closer than ever, and the Baron himself might arrive to claim what he believed was his. But they were ready. The morning sun barely touched the hills when Jack and Ayasha began their careful descent from the rocky caves. The wind was cool, carrying the smell of dry grass and distant pine. Jack's eyes were sharp, scanning the valley below. Somewhere in that expanse, Baron von Richter and his men were plotting their next move. The time had come. They could no longer simply run. They would have to confront the Baron and show that neither fear nor wealth could dictate a person's life. Ayasha rode close behind Jack, gripping the horse's mane tightly. Her mind raced with fear, but also with determination. The lessons of the past days had prepared her in ways she had not imagined. She had learned to read the land, to anticipate danger, and, most importantly, to trust someone else completely. Jack had become her protector, her guide, and in a strange way her anchor in a world that had threatened to destroy her freedom. Jack motioned to a narrow canyon below. "We'll make our stand here," he whispered. "The rocks give us cover, and the Baron won't see us until it's too late." Ayasha's eyes widened as she looked down. The canyon was tight with high cliffs on either side. It was perfect for an ambush. She nodded silently, trusting Jack's judgment.
"I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her chest.
They moved quickly, silently guiding Thunder down the hidden paths. Every step was calculated. Jack knew that even the smallest mistake could give their position away. They reached the bottom of the canyon and found a small plateau, hidden from immediate view. Jack dismounted first, checking the area thoroughly, then helped Ayasha off the horse. Together, they crouched behind a large boulder, observing the valley below. The Baron's men appeared in the distance first. Their horses kicked up dust as they advanced methodically, confident that they would soon capture the woman who had defied their master. Baron von Richter himself followed behind them, mounted on a sleek black horse. His tall frame and expensive clothing marked him as a man used to power, authority, and control. His eyes scanned the land, cold and calculating, as if he already believed that Ayasha's resistance was futile. Jack whispered, "Stay low. Let them come closer. We'll use the rocks to our advantage." Ayasha nodded, her heart pounding. She could feel the fear of the men around them, but she focused on Jack's calm determination. She understood now that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. As the Baron's men drew near, Jack picked up a small rock and tossed it lightly to the side. The sound echoed slightly, catching the attention of a few riders. They paused, scanning the rocks and the shadows. Jack and Ayasha stayed perfectly still, hidden by the uneven terrain. The Baron's men exchanged words, frustrated at the sudden distraction. "Where did she go?" one of them muttered. Jack gritted his teeth, keeping his voice low in his own mind. "Not yet," he thought. "Wait for the right moment." The Baron himself dismounted at the edge of the plateau, surveying the land with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "She cannot escape me," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "Send men to search every corner. She is mine by right, and nothing will change that." Ayasha felt a surge of anger at his words. She stepped slightly behind the boulder, careful not to reveal herself, and whispered to Jack, "I'm not his. I never agreed to this. I will not be forced." Jack nodded, proud of her courage. "I know," he said softly. "And we're going to make sure of that." He signaled to Ayasha to stay put as he moved along the edge of the rocks. From this vantage point, he could see exactly how the Baron's men were positioned. They were spread out, expecting to find easy prey. Jack's plan was simple but risky. He would use the rocks to create confusion, isolating the men from one another, and then force the Baron into a corner where his wealth and arrogance could not protect him. Jack's movements were precise. He rolled small rocks down the slope, creating the illusion of footsteps in the wrong direction. The Baron's men reacted immediately, chasing after the sound, their formation breaking. Jack and Ayasha remained hidden, their hearts pounding but controlled. The Baron, realizing his men were scattered, advanced cautiously. "Come out!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the canyon. "You cannot hide from me!" Ayasha's eyes blazed. She stepped forward slightly, raising her voice so the Baron could hear. "I will not go with you," she declared. "I am not your possession. I am my own person." The Baron's face twisted with rage. "You will obey me? You have no choice!" Jack stepped from behind the boulder, placing himself between Ayasha and the Baron. "She does have a choice," he said firmly, "and it's a choice you will not take from her." The Baron laughed, a harsh, cold sound. "And who are you to stop me?" Jack's hand hovered near his rifle, his eyes locked on the Baron. "Someone who won't let a cruel, arrogant man take what isn't his." The Baron's men began to regroup, realizing that the fight would not be simple. Jack's plan worked as intended. The terrain gave him an advantage, and the Baron's men were forced to act carefully. They approached cautiously, unsure of the hidden position of their target. Jack signaled to Ayasha to stay behind him, ready to move at the right moment. Ayasha watched, a mixture of fear and awe swelling inside her. Jack moved with calm precision, every step measured, every action calculated. She realized now why she had survived this long. It wasn't just skill. It was courage, patience, and intelligence combined. Suddenly, One of the Baron's men slipped on the rocks, crashing loudly to the ground. The Baron's attention turned to the sound, giving Jack the opportunity he needed. He grabbed Ayasha's arm and pulled her to a hidden ledge, while the remaining men struggled to regain their balance. The Baron's face turned red with fury as he realized the trick. "You will not escape me!" the Baron shouted. Ayasha's voice rang out, stronger than before. "I am not yours to claim!" The Baron advanced toward them, but Jack positioned himself strategically, using the rocks to block the Baron's path. The two men faced each other, the Baron with his wealth, arrogance, and authority, and Jack with courage, skill, and the determination to protect. The confrontation was tense, every movement critical. Jack used the terrain to his advantage, forcing the Baron to move where he could be contained, limiting his options. The Baron's anger grew with every step, but Ayasha's courage remained unwavering. Finally, after what felt like hours, the Baron realized that his wealth and influence could not overcome Jack's skill and the natural advantage of the terrain. He backed down temporarily, retreating with his men, humiliated but alive. Jack and Ayasha remained behind the boulder, hearts racing but bodies tense. They were free for now, but the danger was far from gone. Ayasha turned to Jack, her voice trembling but full of emotion. You saved me. You risked everything." Jack shook his head. "We saved each other. You had the courage to fight too. That made all the difference." The two of them stayed in the canyon that night, catching their breath and tending to minor scrapes from the climb. Ayasha realized that freedom was not just about escaping danger. It was about claiming her own life, making choices for herself and standing firm even when the world tried to take her down. Jack watched over her as she rested, knowing the Baron might return, but also knowing that together they had proven something important. Courage and determination could stand against power and wealth. The stars shone brightly over the canyon that night, silent witnesses to the bravery of two people who had faced fear, danger, and cruelty, and had refused to be broken. They understood now that their fight was not just for survival, but for the right to choose their own destiny. And as the night deepened, they knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new opportunities. For the first time, they had confronted the Baron directly and survived. They had shown that even the most powerful could be resisted when courage, strategy, and determination were on your side. In that quiet, starlit canyon, Jack and Ayasha found a moment of peace, a moment to prepare for whatever lay ahead. Their journey was far from over, but they had proven that freedom was worth fighting for, and that together they could face whatever dangers the world might throw their way. The first light of dawn spread across the plains, casting a soft glow over the hills and valleys. Jack Sawyer and Ayasha had spent the night in the canyon, resting after their tense confrontation with Baron von Richter. Though their bodies ached from the climb and the scramble to evade the Baron's men, their spirits felt lighter. For the first time in days, Ayasha felt a sense of hope, a feeling that freedom was no longer just a dream, but something she could reach. Jack mounted Thunder first, his eyes scanning the horizon. "We can't stay here," he said softly. "The Baron will regroup. He might be back soon, and I don't want to take any chances." Ayasha climbed onto the horse behind him, holding on tightly. "Where do we go now?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with determination. She had learned much during their journey, how to read the land, how to move silently, and how courage could change the course of events. Jack guided them toward a dense forest in the distance. The trees were thick and tall, perfect for hiding from anyone who might be searching. The path was difficult, winding, and sometimes slippery from morning dew, but Jack moved with sure-footed confidence, helping Ayasha whenever needed. As they traveled, Ayasha spoke of her family and her home. "I don't know if they are safe," she admitted, her voice tinged with worry. "I left them to escape the Baron, but what if something happened while I was gone?" Jack's expression softened. "We'll find a way back to them," he said. "Right now, we need to stay safe and make sure the Baron doesn't catch up. After that, we can think about returning home." The forest opened into a wide clearing where a small stream ran through tall grass. Jack led Thunder to the water, while Ayasha dismounted carefully. They drank and rested for a moment, enjoying the quiet. The beauty of the landscape reminded them both that the world was larger than danger, fear, or cruelty. There were places of peace and freedom, places worth fighting for. While Ayasha rested, Jack scanned the horizon. He had noticed movement in the distance, small clouds of dust that indicated horses approaching. His eyes narrowed. The Baron had not given up. He was coming, determined to reclaim what he believed was his. "We have company," Jack said quietly. "The Baron is following us again." Ayasha's pulse quickened, but she didn't panic. She had learned courage over the past days, and now it was time to put it into action. "What do we do?" she asked. Jack smiled faintly, proud of her determination. "We use the forest to our advantage. Stay close to me and follow my lead." They moved through the trees, careful to avoid open spaces. The Baron's men rode into the clearing but were quickly confused by the dense forest, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. Jack guided Ayasha along hidden paths, occasionally using fallen branches and rocks to create obstacles that would slow the pursuers. Hours passed with careful movement, until finally they reached a small hill overlooking a valley below. From this vantage point they could see a settlement nestled in the distance. Houses clustered together, smoke rising from chimneys, and people going about their daily lives. This was Ayasha's home territory, the place she had dreamed of returning to. Tears filled Ayasha's eyes as she looked at the familiar land. "We're almost there," she whispered. "My family. They'll be waiting." Jack nodded, but his gaze remained sharp. "Almost there," he repeated. "We still need to be cautious." The Baron may try one last time. True to his prediction, a distant shout carried on the wind. Baron von Richter had caught sight of them again, furious at the continued escape. His men began to ride faster, determined to reach Ayasha before she could find safety. Jack and Ayasha prepared themselves. Jack dismounted and held Ayasha's hands. "Listen to me," he said. "You are stronger than you know. You faced fear, danger, and threats that most people couldn't survive. But I need you to stay calm and trust me." Ayasha nodded. "I trust you," she said firmly. "Let's finish this." Together, they moved quickly down the hill, using hidden trails that wound through the trees. They reached the edge of the settlement just as the Baron and his men arrived at the outskirts. Villagers stopped and stared, confused by the sight of the armed men. Baron von Richter's face twisted with rage as he realized his quarry was about to vanish into a place he could not easily follow. Ayasha's heart raced, but she felt a calm determination settle over her. She dismounted and ran toward the village, shouting for her family. From the distance, figures appeared. Family members, friends, and neighbors rushing to her side. Their presence created a protective barrier she could not have imagined just days ago. The Baron's men hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. They had been trained to track and intimidate, but not to confront a community united to protect one of their own. Baron von Richter himself rode forward, eyes blazing. "She is mine," he shouted. "Do not interfere!" But the villagers did not step back. They surrounded Ayasha, their voices strong and resolute. "She is our own," one of the elders shouted. "You have no claim here." Jack stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Ayasha. His eyes met the Baron's, steady and unwavering. "You will not take her," he said. "Not here. Not ever." For the first time, the Baron realized that his wealth and power were meaningless against courage, determination, and unity. He could intimidate individuals, but he could not overcome an entire community willing to protect one of their own. Slowly, he reined in his horse, his face red with anger and frustration. "You have won this time," he said, his voice bitter. "But mark my words, I will not forget." Jack kept his eyes on the Baron until he and his men retreated, disappearing into the distance. Only then did he turn to Ayasha, who was surrounded by family and friends, tears of relief streaming down her face.
"We're safe," Jack said softly. "For now." Ayasha hugged him tightly.
"You saved me. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Jack smiled. "You don't need to. You survived. That's enough reward for me." The villagers gathered around, helping Ayasha to her home. She was reunited with her family, who held her close, tears of joy mixing with their words of relief. Jack stayed back for a moment, watching the reunion. He felt a quiet pride. He had kept his promise. He had protected her and helped her reclaim her freedom. As the sun set over the settlement, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, Ayasha and Jack stood together on a small hill overlooking the village. The journey had been long, dangerous, and filled with uncertainty, but they had made it. They had faced fear, confronted cruelty, and emerged victorious. Ayasha turned to Jack. "What will you do now?" she asked. Jack looked out over the horizon. "The world is wide," he said. "There are still trails to ride, people to help, and dangers to face. But maybe I found a place where I can rest for a while." Ayasha smiled. "Then stay," she said softly, "if you want to." Jack looked at her, seeing the strength, courage, and spirit that had carried her through so much. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging beyond the trail, beyond the endless chase. "I think I will," he said. Together, they watched the sun dip below the horizon, the plains glowing in the evening light. The journey had been perilous, filled with challenges and danger, but it had taught them both valuable lessons. Freedom was precious. Courage mattered more than wealth or power. And hope, even in the darkest times, could carry a person through the greatest trials. Ayasha's family welcomed Jack as one of their own, grateful for the man who had risked everything to save their daughter. Over time, Ayasha began to rebuild her life, reconnecting with her roots and rediscovering the joy of being with family. She had been through fear, captivity, and threats, but she had survived and learned that she was stronger than she ever imagined. Jack and Ayasha's bond grew as they traveled together occasionally, sharing stories, laughter, and the quiet moments of life on the plains. They had faced danger, confronted a powerful adversary, and come through stronger. And in the quiet moments beneath the stars, they understood that they were no longer just two people caught in circumstance. They were companions, equals, and friends who had survived together. The Baron, though he remained a looming shadow in the past, never returned. His power and wealth could not reach them in the safety of the village and the open plains. And in that freedom, Jack and Ayasha found something they had never expected: peace, safety, and the knowledge that they could face whatever the future held, together. As the night fell over the settlement, the stars twinkling above like tiny beacons of hope, Ayasha looked at Jack. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack smiled, tipping his hat. "No thanks needed. You found your freedom, and that's all that matters."
And with that, they turned to the village below, ready to embrace the future, free, determined, and stronger than they had ever been.
Their journey had ended, but their story of courage, survival, and hope would live on forever in the hills, the plains, and the hearts of those who knew that true bravery came not from power or wealth, but from standing up for what is right.